Kia ora, hello, I'm Philip Duncan. It is Tuesday the 28th of October. Hope you had a great long weekend. Well, we've got the forecast for you for the last days of October and some brighter news for many regions for the start of November. Let's take a look at the satellite map at the moment. So we've seen some heavy downpours, mostly overnight last night and into the early hours of this morning with a few thunderstorms around the North Island. The next surge is out here at sea. That is moving through as we go through today. That'll come into the western North Island. Take a look at the rain radar. You'll see some decent downpours as that moves in. Now behind it all, you can see the speckled cloud. That's a sign of a cold southerly, and it certainly is. We are seeing some snow around the South Island this morning as that wind comes on in. Look at the lower version. Low pressure spinning south of us and all of that cold air moving northwards where it's mild for the North Island but wintry into the lower part of the South Island as spring continues to do its thing. So this spring has certainly been more energetic than previous years, and usually once we go into the month of November we start to see some of this stuff easing right back because the days are getting longer, the sun's out more often, and so the stormy wintry stuff tends to gradually drop southwards. But we can still have cold fronts and windy westerlies, so I'm not saying that's finished, but we should start to see a bit more breathing space now, which will be very good news for the southern part of the country, which has had a relentless spring with very, almost non-stop cold blasts and windy weather. So good to see a high on the way, but not just yet. As we go into this evening, temperatures are down. The blue shading means temperatures are below zero as early as 6 p.m. Obviously mostly at higher elevations, but the temperatures are down with that southerly change or southwesterly moving right up the country. It may still be a bit westerly for the eastern side of the North Island for a time, but then we do still expect that southerly or southwesterly change to move in tonight. So the temperatures are dropping nationwide, but there's still another burst of windy weather for the North Island. So I mentioned that cold front out at sea that's moving in through the afternoon with these heavy squally showers. The purple shading that you can see sort of just appearing here, getting up to about 90 k's an hour, maybe 100 k's an hour, some of the eastern ranges. But Auckland is a particular wind tunnel for this setup. So that will blow through the Auckland area and surrounds Coromandel Peninsula as well, coastal parts of Waikato, maybe Taranaki, and right down towards Wanganui and Manawatu, getting that strong wind straight off the sea as we go in towards today. The good news is this is right at the lowest end of the scale as far as severe weather is concerned, especially when you compare it to what we had last week. So with the southerly change coming on through, frosty weather returns. Now we had it this morning, temperatures were well down as we go through into Wednesday morning, frosty weather in the purple, and then that shrinks back further into Thursday. You'll be pleased about that in Southland and Otago, seeing that frosty zone shrink back further as temperatures start to lift up just a little bit, and the North Island basically frost-free other than the volcanic plateau. So here is Wednesday's setup. We've got some high pressure moving towards the far north, and you've got the polar boundary pretty much over the entire South Island and into the lower North Island. So temperatures are down, a few snow flurries around the North Island's mountains and ranges, and the winds in the lower South Island tilt back a little more westerly, adds another degree or two. That's why the frosty weather is not so likely in coastal areas on Wednesday morning, and even further into Thursday morning as those winds pick up further. Still under the polar boundary, so temperatures are down in Southland, Otago, and over in Southwestland. Further northwards, west to northwest winds blowing through, so temperatures won't be too bad. Now there will be a few western showers, and as you go to the top half of the North Island, high pressure northeast of us and high pressure west of us sort of joining a bridge over northern New Zealand, much lighter winds in that area. Now you also notice a few showers at the top of the country. That's associated with a weak low pressure zone that is out in the northern Tasman Sea. So it might just brush New Zealand with a few showers. That is a subtropical airflow though, so it's going to be mild for the top of New Zealand while it's still wintry, the lower part of New Zealand. And we've got another surge of wind. Here's the good news. This is the last of the wind maps that I've got in the video today. So we're not expecting a major week like last week, but another surge of windy weather, mostly around Stewart Island, Fovo Strait, Bluff, but also some of the hills and ranges going into northern Southland, parts of Otago. Just could be getting some blustery conditions. It's right at the lower end of the scale, but based on all the damage that occurred last week, it's definitely worth highlighting for those of you that are out there cleaning things up. So as we go into Friday, the last day of October, Halloween, high pressure moving in, not very scary, and we've got a cold airflow still stuck around Southland and Otago, caught up in that southerly flow. Now that is easing on Friday. That'll be the last day of that polar airflow, but it does still linger around, at least for the morning, and southwesterly winds elsewhere, so temperatures are down a little bit, but nothing too major, and also quite dry, especially into the North Island. South Island's got a better chance of getting showers around. But look at that. So we put out a forecast, a couple of weeks ago, saying not locked in, November 1st, showing the chance of a big high right smack bang over the country. And it's always risky doing that at any time of the year for a country like New Zealand, 2 mountainous islands in the roaring 40s. However, this is a testament to that long-range modelling. Here is this big, powerful high, 1030 hectopascals. That is a solid high pressure system, and it's parked on both sides of the country. Now, sometimes when that happens, you can get a bit of cloud convergence building up in the middle, so we might get a few cloudy areas. Some showers here maybe around Hawke's Bay. Actually, Hawke's Bay is probably the only region in the country that doesn't really want a high pressure zone, unless you're a townie, and then it's great timing for the weekend. But for the farmers and the growers and those that rely on rainwater, things are really drying out in Hawke's Bay. So to be seeing such a big high pressure zone over the area, not the greatest for you, but for everybody else, those winds disappear, the downpours disappear, the cold weather has gone south of us, the polar boundary out only over the Chatham Islands as we go into Saturday. And by Sunday, the polar boundary has gone and is now being replaced by a somewhat subtropical airflow for some areas, like the very top of the country and the very southern part of the country as that airflow comes in. So temperatures lift up going into the weekend, which means November's first weekend is looking pretty good around New Zealand. And even as we kick off the first full working week of November, high pressure, that's another high here over the South Island, dominating the country with this northeasterly lean driving in warmer airflows for many parts of New Zealand. Storms are back down where they should be, down near Antarctica. But it's worth noting Australia still has these almost wintry, very spring-like cold fronts and lows that are still in the mix between these big highs, which are all starting to drop southwards. So there are a few things going on. Let's jump to the Northern Hemisphere now. The most powerful storm of 2025 now in play in the Atlantic Basin. This is Jamaica, and that's where the storm is heading. Very powerful, Category 5 Hurricane Melissa. Population of Jamaica, 2.8 million. And Montego Bay, which is in the northwest corner, that's where the storm is most likely to get the closest to as far as the main centres are concerned. Here is the tracking from the National Hurricane Centre, courtesy of NOAA. There's Jamaica, all in red, meaning the whole island nation is under a hurricane warning. And there are some stories that say this could be the most powerful hurricane to ever hit Jamaica. We'll just have to wait and see. But right now, most powerful storm of the year, just off their southern coastline. Then it moves into Cuba, and then further on up to the Bahamas, where it weakens further and then goes out to sea into the Atlantic. So here is the tracking of it. This is overnight tonight, New Zealand time, 4 in the morning. Here's the local time in Jamaica. Very powerful storm just off the coastline here. Jump forward 6 hours, it's made landfall, and now it's close to Montego Bay. Damaging winds, all in this area where all the isobars are squeezed together. Some good news is that as you jump over to Kingston, it's not so much in the severe weather area, at least not for wind, but storm surges and heavy rain. I mean, we're talking over 0.5 metre of rain with this storm event. And then you jump forward another 6 hours, 4 o'clock Wednesday afternoon, New Zealand time, back out at sea, now clearing Jamaica, and then it's Cuba's turn. And then another 6 hours later, smack bang over the top of Cuba, air pressure rising, damaging winds shrinking a little bit as it moves into Cuba, and then it jumps beyond that, past the Bahamas, and out to sea. Look at the central air pressure, 906 hectopascals, and the sustained winds when we recorded this, 280 kilometres an hour. So to be gusting 340, 350 kilometres an hour. So extremely damaging storm heading towards Jamaica. And also another thing to point out, 906 hectopascals makes that storm that hit Stewart Island last week at 957 look incredibly weak in comparison, which, as we know, it wasn't a very weak storm last week in New Zealand. But here we are looking at a much bigger storm system, and it's always good to compare so that you understand where your severe weather is on the scale that is a global one. That is all from me for today. I'll be back again with your New Zealand forecast tomorrow, Wednesday.